Today I'd like to talk about some ideas I've been picking up from videos I've been watching of Dr. Bruce Lipton, who is famous for his work with genetics. And one of the things that struck me about his investigation of genetics is that he started out basically with the same assumption that many people have had, which is essentially that the body was governed by the genes. Those textbooks essentially were promoting an idea that we are controlled by our genes, even though it had never been actually proven. Is the country of 1 trillion cells. We are influenced by things that come in from the outside and our own thoughts and feelings. Controls the blood chemistry of the human body, and that is to have a bad feeling and thought state. And that would produce chemicals that would pass through the body, through the bloodstream, that would be essentially telling those genes, influencing the membrane of each cell, telling those genes to react in a certain way. And one of those things one of those easy ones to study is essentially the study of stress. So stress causes certain chemicals to be released into the bloodstream. What that does is it tells the body, don't bother with health right now, be ready for fight or flight. Now there is another side to this. The very chemical producing agent, the mind, if it is on love, when it focuses on love, different chemicals are put out. What we think can truly affect each and every cell in our body. And as it affects those cells in our body, so it affects the whole body, and the whole body then begins a feedback mechanism to us. And often if you start thinking depressive thoughts, I have found it to be very true, the body then begins to feel depressed. You move to a state of love and acceptance, to a state of open-heartedness. Into that state, if you can move to that state, then you set up the chemicals in your body to be turned on to make the body healthy, to make a sense of happiness and well-being, etc. Mind, how it feels. Your experience of being a human being, essence, is not so much determined by your genetic code. Rather, it's by your behavior. And so I would like to talk to you about a form of behavior that could, in general, influence the whole of it without having to work on specific things. I think that's essentially what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the founders of Unity, came up with, was this idea of affirmations and denials. If you could say a denial to make some space for a new thought, if you could say, this behavior does not have any power over me, or this outcome doesn't have any power over me, then you could begin to plan a new idea, develop a new pattern, a new way of thinking, and in so doing, you create essentially the future by changing your present pattern inside your subconscious. They emphasized was this use of the I am, that I am X, Y, or Z. And by doing I am, you begin to change your identity, which is like the central piece of every program. Is like, this is who you are. So if you could change who you are, then you begin to change your outcomes, and you begin to live in such a way that the circumstances of your life change. You move away from trauma and from toxins, and your mind begins to think happier, better thoughts, and you become healthier. There's another solution that I have been extremely fond of lately, which is found by the founder by the name of Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi was an Indian saint who in the 20th century had this revelation that he's not his body or his mind, but is that, the very thing, the essence of the universe, the very spirit. In other words, if you changed your identity from being the body and the mind to being the source itself, to being love itself, or wisdom, or the divine, however you say it, if you moved your identity back to that, then all that was programmed in would begin to settle out and reprogram itself so that you would live now in a much more pleasant way without actually having to grind it out to do each and every transformation of your personality. So you move into this sense of I am and ask the question, where did this come from? Or who is this? Or what is this? And essentially you move down into a quieter state of realization. Now, as we were started out with the idea of individual cells are influenced by the outside, so it is that the presence of all the totality of these cells, you, whatever this community of 1 trillion cells is, this you is influenced by the source. And when you bring your attention toward the source, you essentially deepen the clarity of the connection there, and it doesn't go through the filters of every program that you've developed over your lifetime. You cease to be the victim of the world you see and begin to be the source of your own experience. And in your experience can be trauma or even unhealth, and it doesn't matter because that's not who you are. But fortunately, as you hang out in there, trauma and disease begin to go away because we're now in more alignment with the divine itself.